Hello, I'm Avery, and this is the story of how my own family tried to erase me, not just from their lives, but from our legacy. It started at a family BBQ. My dad pointed to a table shoved beside the restroom and said, "That's your seat." I left. The next day, he smashed my car window. Why? Because I stopped paying their debts. But that wasn't even the worst of it. Behind the smiles, behind the family photos, was a plan, years in the making. A stolen will, a forged signature, a quiet exile. They thought I'd stay quiet. They thought I'd need them. But I remembered who I was. And now, I've got the truth. How far would your family go to keep control? The smell of grilled meat hit me before I even turned into the driveway. The sound of laughter rolled across the yard, carried by the late summer air. It was the same sound I'd grown up hearing every Sunday afternoon. Family voices, familiar and loud. I paused for a moment, watching from my car window. The string lights were already up, swaying between the oak trees, and Vera, my mother, was arranging napkins on the buffet table like she was setting up for a magazine shoot. I forced a smile, smoothed the front of my blouse, and stepped out. I'd told myself 100 times on the way here. Just be polite. Smile. Don't let them get to you this time. "Hey!" I waved lightly, but the words barely reached anyone. They were all too busy catching up, laughing, refilling their drinks. Dad stood by the grill, metal tongs in hand, wearing the same best dad ever apron I'd bought him years ago, back when I still believed the title fit. He looked up when he saw me. No smile, no greeting, just a blank glance, quick and cutting. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he pointed toward the far end of the yard. "That's your seat," he said, nodding toward a folding table shoved near the restroom door, right beside the trash bins. The words landed like a slap, quiet but brutal. My stomach turned, but I swallowed the bitterness, forcing my lips into something that resembled calm. "Sure," I murmured, pretending not to notice the sideways looks from my cousins. I walked past the main tables, white tablecloths, platters of ribs, laughter bubbling like a warm current I wasn't allowed to touch. When I reached my corner, the air smelled faintly of bleach and garbage. A fly buzzed near my plate. I sat down anyway. They hadn't changed the music in years. Same country playlist Dad loved, the one he'd play so loud the neighbors complained. I used to dance barefoot to it with Isolde, my sister, back when everything felt simpler. But now, watching her hold court in her sundress, smiling for everyone's approval, all I could think was how easily she fit into the family's idea of perfect. "Didn't expect you'd actually come," she said, her tone sugar-coated but sharp. "We thought you'd be too busy, saving the world with your new job." I smiled thinly. "Just trying to pay my bills." Her grin widened. "Still doing that charity work thing?" "Accounting for nonprofits," I corrected. "Not charity, it's management." She tilted her head. "Right. Must be hard, though, with everything." Everything. That word again. The invisible sum of all the favors I'd done, all the debts I'd paid, all the times I'd saved them without being asked. I excused myself, pretending to check my phone, but really just needing air. The voices faded behind me, replaced by the dull hum of the refrigerator by the back door. When I returned, Dad was holding a beer and raising his glass for a toast. "To family," he announced, grinning toward Isolde and Mom. "To those who keep us together, no matter what." The clinking of glasses echoed. My name wasn't mentioned. My seat wasn't approached. I felt my chest tighten, like someone had poured cement inside me. Then a small voice cut through the noise. "Why is Aunt Avery sitting all by herself?" Mila's voice, bright, innocent, rang out. Every head turned toward me. For a second, I thought someone might laugh it off, correct her, invite me to the main table. But no one moved. Mom's lips tightened. "Eat your burger, sweetheart," she said softly. The silence that followed was worse than any insult. I stood up, brushed the crumbs from my lap, and reached for my purse. My movements were slow, deliberate, like I didn't want them to see my hands shaking. "Where are you going?" Dad asked casually, not even looking at me. "Home," I said simply. He shrugged, turned back to the grill, and flipped a steak. The screen door creaked as I walked through. Behind me, laughter resumed. Outside, the sky was starting to fade into lavender, the sun melting behind the trees. I walked to my car parked by the curb, my heels crunching the gravel. I could still hear the faint echo of country music and clinking bottles, like a soundtrack to someone else's life. I slid into the driver's seat and sat there for a long moment, hands gripping the wheel. My reflection stared back from the windshield, eyes tired, mouth trembling but determined. This is who they are, I thought, and this is who I've become to them. When I finally turned the key, my chest felt lighter, not free but unburdened. The drive home was quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your ears. Streetlights flickered on one by one, painting the empty road gold. I didn't cry. I'd done that enough times before. By the time I reached my apartment, the sky had turned indigo. The familiar hum of the air conditioner greeted me when I stepped inside. I tossed my keys on the counter and sat on the couch, still in my shoes. I scrolled through my phone out of habit, old messages, group chats that no longer included me. Then, in the corner of the screen, a photo popped up from years ago. Dad's birthday, all of us around the cake. I was there, at the edge, half smiling, holding the camera timer. Even then, I hadn't been in the center. I walked to the shelf where a small frame held another picture, me signing a check for their mortgage 3 years ago, the day they nearly lost the house. I'd told myself I did it out of love. Now I wasn't sure if love had anything to do with it. This was the last time. I whispered to the empty room. I took off my shoes, made tea, and sat by the window. Outside, the street was still. A cat darting between parked cars. My apartment was small, but peaceful. Mine. For once, I didn't feel the need to apologize for being alone. The mug warmed my hands as I stared out into the night. I felt the ache in my chest shifting, not fading, but changing shape, turning from pain into clarity. Then, a buzz cut through the stillness. My phone vibrated on the coffee table. Unknown number. I let it ring. A second buzz followed, this time louder. I ignored it again. Then came the sound, a sharp thud from outside, followed by the unmistakable crack of glass. I jumped to the window. My car, parked right below the street light, now had a spiderweb of shattered glass across the driver's side. The alarm blared through the night, cutting the quiet in half. I didn't move for a full minute. My tea went cold in my hands, and in that moment I knew this wasn't random. It was personal. For a few seconds, I stood frozen at the window, the blaring car alarm echoing through my chest like a war drum. Then instinct kicked in. I grabbed my keys from the counter and sprinted downstairs barefoot. The pavement stung against the soles of my feet, cold and unforgiving. The night smelled of damp asphalt and something acrid, the sharp tang of broken trust. My car sat under the streetlight like a wounded animal. The driver's side window was gone, reduced to glittering shards scattered across the seat and ground like cruel confetti. No note, no signs of a thief, just that violent silence. I crouched low, reaching out to touch a jagged piece still clinging to the frame. It was warm, fresh. Whoever did this hadn't gone far. My eyes scanned the lot. A curtain in the unit across the lot twitched. A figure shifted behind it, then retreated. The alarm screamed until I finally managed to shut it off. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was eerie, unnatural, like the world was holding its breath. A door creaked above. Mrs. Hill from 2B leaned over the balcony, her robe cinched tightly at the waist. "You all right down there, honey?" "Yeah," I lied. Someone broke into my car." She squinted through the dim light. "Happens around here sometimes. Probably kids," she muttered, though her voice held doubt. I called the police anyway. The dispatcher sounded like she was reading from a script. "Officers will be dispatched to your location shortly." When the patrol car arrived, the 2 officers strolled around like they were inspecting a pothole, not a break-in. One of them tapped his flashlight against his palm and asked, "No security cameras?" I shook my head. "The landlord said they're too expensive." He sighed. "No note, no real damage inside. Could be random, could be personal. Could be personal. I knew it was. I didn't need evidence. I just needed to look at the broken glass. The calculated nature of it, not robbery, a warning. They handed me a case number scribbled on a card, promised to file a report, and left before midnight. Their taillights vanished down the street like they were fleeing the scene. Back inside, I swept the glass from the car seat with my hand, then returned upstairs. My tea sat untouched on the counter, stone cold. I took a sip anyway, just to taste something familiar, even if it had turned bitter. In the morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds, and for a split second, I convinced myself it had all been a nightmare. But then I saw the police card on the counter, real, undeniable. My phone buzzed, a text from Mom. Vera, we heard about your car. That's what happens when you abandon your family. I stared at it, trying to make sense of how quickly they'd turned my pain into a punishment. Isolde, Dad's furious. You knew we needed you this month. How could you just stop helping like that? Helping, that's the word they always used, as if I were just assisting, not funding their lives while sacrificing my own. I scrolled through older messages. Apologies laced with manipulation, promises they never intended to keep. We'll pay you back next week. It's just a short-term thing. Lies. I pulled open the drawer beneath my desk. Inside was a stack of envelopes, payment receipts, transfer slips, proof of everything I'd done for them. I used to feel proud of that drawer. Responsible. A good daughter. But now, all I saw were shackles, paper chains I'd forged with my own hands. Then came the voicemail. You owe us, my father's voice growled in my ear. You'd be nothing without us. Don't make us remind you again. I didn't flinch. But something inside me recoiled. He hadn't yelled. He didn't need to. He'd perfected the art of control. Guilt. Debt. The quiet threats always cut deeper. I closed the drawer. Slowly, deliberately, my hands were trembling, not from fear of him, but from fear of myself, of what I might do if I let this cycle continue. At my laptop, I opened my bank account. My savings stared back at me, quietly eroding with each month I kept playing their provider. I moved the cursor over auto payments, hovered, clicked, cancel scheduled transfers. The confirmation message popped up in a flash of sterile blue. Your recurring payments have been canceled. No fireworks, no cheers. But I felt it, something shift inside me. A small, seismic movement that cracked the foundation beneath me. I changed my passwords, locked down my accounts. Then I took the family photo off the shelf. From the lake house, 5 years ago. I was in the background, half-cropped, Mom's hand on my shoulder like a warning. I placed the frame face down. Then I opened my journal. I didn't write a letter, not a plan, just a sentence. They don't own me, not anymore. I stared at it and let the ink sink into the page. The finality of it both terrified and thrilled me. By evening, I stood in front of the mirror and practiced. No. It felt foreign, like trying on a coat that didn't quite fit, but it would, eventually. No, I can't. No, I won't. No, that's not my job. Each repetition felt more like truth and less like rebellion. I gathered my papers, lease, insurance, tax forms. I stacked them on the table, a fortress of my own making, proof that I existed beyond them. Later that night, I saw an old message from Mom. We sacrificed everything for you. I whispered back to the screen. You sacrificed your control, not your love. There's a difference. Outside, rain started to fall, soft, rhythmic. It smelled like a beginning. Then my phone rang. Dad. I hesitated, thumb above, decline. But I didn't press it. Avery, he said, voice low. Let's talk. Maybe we went too far. Come home tomorrow. We can fix this. I didn't answer right away. He softened. You know we love you. Family fights. They happen. I looked at the flipped photo frame on the counter. At my reflection in the window, my voice came out quieter than I expected. I'll think about it. Relief in his reply. Good girl. When the call ended, the air in the apartment felt heavier. The rain had stopped, but something darker had begun. I stared at the phone, the silence pressing in. Every instinct screamed at me. This isn't over. This is a setup. And deep down, I knew. The next move they made wouldn't just test me. It would break something in me, something that might never heal. That night, sleep refused to come. Every time I shut my eyes, I heard my father's voice, calm, rehearsed, dripping with control. Good girl. 2 words, a command disguised as praise, echoing in the shadows like an old wound reopened. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling in the dim light, my stomach churning with unease. The silence in the apartment felt heavy, as if the walls had absorbed my shame. By 5 a.m., I gave up trying to rest. I dragged myself into the kitchen, brewed the strongest coffee I could manage, and sat by the window. Outside, the morning fog blurred the parking lot like a faded memory. My car was still there, its window patched with a fluttering sheet of plastic, a reminder that even my belongings weren't safe anymore. Each ripple in the film whispered with every gust of wind, they took everything, and they're not done. By mid-morning, a sharp knock broke the silence. I jolted, heart racing, but it wasn't a person, just the mail. On the floor lay a pristine white envelope. The handwriting was elegant, too clean to be casual, definitely not a bill. No return address, but the stamp was local. Cautiously, I opened it. Inside was a thick ivory card. Family Reset Dinner. The heading was printed in bold serif font, the kind you'd find on corporate letterhead. We believe it's time to rebuild, to forgive, to reconnect. It was signed, with love, Vera, and Valerian. My hands went cold. A reset? Like this was some marketing campaign to relaunch a brand. My family was now inviting me to a reconciliation like it was a press event. The absurdity of it made my stomach twist. My mother, ever the PR queen of emotional manipulation, she never apologized. She rebranded. Then I saw the location. Riverbend House. A lump formed in my throat. That house. Once my pride. I remembered the day I'd signed the joint ownership papers, thinking it meant I was finally part of something real. Family. Stability. Security. I shoved the invitation aside and pulled open my desk drawer, the one where I kept everything. Receipts, court notices, tax forms, and the record of every sacrifice I had ever made for them. Beneath layers of paper, I found a manila envelope labeled Property Records in my own handwriting. Inside were copies of documents from years ago. On one page, in black ink, Joint Ownership, Avery Cole. But when I compared it to a recent email from Mom about routine tax adjustments, something didn't add up. The new documents didn't list me at all. A sinking feeling formed in my chest as I logged into the county's property records website. I had used the system before, back when I was paying their property taxes online. I typed in the parcel ID. Current owners, Valerian Cole, Vera Cole, Isolda Marin. My name was gone. Erased. I stared at the screen, blinking, waiting for my name to appear. Some glitch, some error. I refreshed. Again. Again. Still nothing. I felt the world tilt beneath me. A hollow roar rang in my ears. My identity had been removed not just from their hearts, but from public record, like I'd never existed. Then it hit me. A memory I had buried deep. 4 years ago, dinner at Riverbend. Same chandelier overhead. Same cold roast chicken. Just sign this real quick, sweetheart, Mom had said, passing a document across the table. It's for refinancing, just temporary. Why do I need to come off? I'd asked, pausing mid-bite. For the credit check, she'd replied, sweet as syrup. It'll go back to normal in a week. Dad chuckled, swirling his wine. Trust your mother, kiddo. Even Isolda had chimed in, rolling her eyes. It's just a form. Stop being dramatic. And like a fool, I signed. Because back then, I still believed family meant something. I closed my eyes, replaying the sound of the pen on paper. That soft scrape now ringing like a siren in my head. Back in the present, I picked up the phone and called the county office. Property records, this is Diane. Hi, Diane, I said, my voice too steady to be honest. I'm checking on title changes for Riverbend House. Can you confirm if there have been any updates in the last 5 years? A pause. Typing. Yes, she replied. Filings in 2019, 2021, and one last year. The latest transfer lists a Cressida Marin. My jaw clenched. Cressida? She wasn't even old enough to rent a car. Are you sure? I asked. Yep. Signed off by Vera and Valerian Cole. And, well, looks like consent from all prior joint holders. All parties. That meant me. I swallowed hard. Could you send me a copy of that transfer document? Sure. I'll email it to the address on file. I quickly gave her an alternate email, one they wouldn't recognize. When the file arrived, I opened it and froze. There it was, my signature, or at least what they claimed was mine. Perfect cursive, uncanny in its precision, but I knew my own loops and strokes, and this was a forgery. Below it, Cressida's signature sparkled in blue ink. They had replaced me, not metaphorically, not emotionally, legally. I stood so fast the chair screeched against the floor. My whole body trembled. I started pacing, trying to catch my breath, but the memories flooded in. The guilt trips, the sudden emergencies, the last-minute requests for wiring money. Every time I had helped, they gained something. And slowly, I had disappeared from everything. I sat again and scribbled timelines, matching my help with their gains. The pattern was crystal clear. This wasn't carelessness. It was a calculated erasure. I opened a new browser tab and began drafting an email. To whom it may concern, I am seeking legal counsel regarding potential property fraud and unauthorized title transfers related to Riverbend House. I signed it with my full name, Avery C. Cole. Not the nickname they used to dismiss me, not the girl they tricked. As I hit send, a strange calm spread through me, a calm born not of peace, but of precision, cold and cutting. The sun had shifted, casting long shadows across the floor. I watched them stretch, quiet witnesses to everything I now knew. Then, 3 sharp knocks at the door. I didn't move at first, just stared at the handle. Then slowly, I rose. Because now, I was ready. I froze when I heard the knock. Not loud, not rushed, but slow and deliberate, each beat spaced just enough to make my heart hitch. It wasn't the kind of knock that demanded entry. It was the kind that waited to be noticed, patient, unsettling, almost polite. My mind raced with possibilities. A neighbor, a solicitor, maybe the mailman, returning a misdelivered package. But when I opened the door, the last face I expected was standing on the other side. Lumen? Her name slipped out before I could stop it. She looked smaller than I remembered, not just physically, though she had always carried herself taller, but softer somehow, quieter. Her hair, once sunlit gold, was now darker, braided loosely over her shoulder. 10 years had passed since we'd last stood this close, at our grandmother's funeral. She had left that day without a proper goodbye, claiming she needed a fresh start somewhere far from everything. And now, here she was. Standing on my doorstep, a cardboard box pressed tight to her chest, like a shield. Hey, Avery, she said, voice steady but barely above a whisper. Can I come in? I hesitated, instinctively scanning her for motive. This wasn't just a social visit. I could feel the weight she carried, not just in her arms, but behind her eyes. Yeah, sure. I stepped aside. She entered cautiously, like the walls might collapse if she moved too fast. Her gaze swept the apartment. Tidy, minimalist, a space designed for solitude. She settled at the edge of the couch, the box still in her lap as though putting it down might make everything spill out at once. I should have called, she said, fingers tracing the worn edges of the box. But I wasn't sure you'd answer. I would have, I said. A lie, but one I told gently. She placed the box on the coffee table. It made a faint scraping sound that felt louder than it was. I found these in Mom's attic. Old letters. Photos. Stuff Grandma kept. I eyed the box, then her. Why bring them here? Lumen looked up, her gaze locking with mine. Because you need to see what they never wanted you to remember. The air between us shifted, dense with something unspoken. I reached for the box, carefully lifting the lid. Inside were bundles of yellowed envelopes tied with ribbon, faded photographs, and a few notebooks with brittle pages. I picked up one photo, a backyard birthday, faces grinning in sunlight. I was there too, in the background as always, eyes turned away from the camera, half smiling like I didn't belong. "You always looked like you were somewhere else," Lumen said softly. "Like you were trying to disappear." Maybe I was. She hesitated, then drew a shaky breath. "Avery, what they did to you wasn't just unfair, it was calculated. I remember that night. The one when they told you not to go to college, said family needed you here. You gave them your savings. Every last dollar." My chest tightened. "You remember that? I brought you lemonade in the backyard. You were crying so hard I didn't know what to say. Later, Mom told me never to mention it again, said it was family business." A silence fell between us, but it wasn't empty. It hummed with resurfaced memories. I could smell that summer night again. Citronella candles, mowed grass, the distant clink of ice in glasses from inside the house. "They said it was a loan," I muttered. "They said a lot of things." She reached into the box and pulled out a folded letter. "Read this one. Dated 2015. It's from your mom to Isolde. Grandma kept a copy." I unfolded the page. My mother's handwriting, unmistakable, elegant, practiced, cold. "Avery is too emotional to handle finances. It's best we consolidate her assets before she does something reckless." Below that, written in Grandma's faint cursive, "She's the only one earning. And they call her unstable." Lord help her! I felt the words like a slap. My hands trembled. "They all said it," Lumen whispered. "When I stayed with them, I heard it over and over, that you couldn't be trusted, that they had to protect you, from yourself. But the truth was, you were the only one holding the family together." I looked at her. "Why now? Why come here and tell me all this now?" She hesitated. "Because I saw your name missing from the county property site last week. That house, Grandma's, they moved it under Isolde's name. You were erased. Again." We left the apartment. I needed air, distance, space from the walls that now felt too full of ghosts. At a quiet cafe, we sat in a corner booth, 2 black coffees between us. Lumen pulled out her phone. "Mom used to forward me family emails back then," she said. "Some from Vera. Look." She showed me an email chain. Subject line, "Avery's situation." My mother wrote, "We can't trust her with her share. She'll blow it on charity or something stupid. It's better we consolidate under the family trust." My father replied, "Agreed. We'll do it slowly. Say it's for her protection. She believes concern." My jaw clenched. They really thought I'd never notice. They didn't care if you did. By the time you did, it'd be too late. Later that night, I found a hand-delivered envelope on my doorstep. Gold-embossed stationery, my mother's favorite. Inside was an invitation, family dinner, Saturday, 7 p.m., a chance to heal. Lumen read it over my shoulder and scoffed. "They don't heal, Avery. They erase." I looked at her, then at the card. I smiled, but not with joy. "I'm going," I said. "Avery, I'm not signing anything. I just want them to see I remember." Saturday came fast. I wore a plain black dress and drove to the house that had shaped me and shattered me. It looked the same, pristine, well-kept, but I was not the same. Mom opened the door, smiling too wide. "Avery, you came. We're so glad." Inside, the table was set like a magazine photo shoot. Dad at the head, Isolde pouring wine, Cressida arranging napkins. Picture perfect. Choreographed. We talked about weather, work, nothing real, until Mom placed a black folder beside my plate. "Just a few papers," she said sweetly. "Legal things, old accounts." I opened it. Legal jargon dressed up in softness. But near the end, a full release of any claims. My signature needed. Sign it so we can move forward, Isolde said, syrup in her voice. I looked at them, calm. You said that before. Dad's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? I mean I'm not signing this. Mom's voice went hard. Avery, it's just paperwork. Just like last time? I asked. The room fell silent. I put the pen down. I'll have my lawyer review it. Dad's face darkened. You don't need a lawyer. You need your family. I met his gaze without blinking. Do I? A long pause. I think you've forgotten who you are, he said. I stood slowly. No, I think I finally remember. I hadn't expected her again so soon. After the silence, the distance, the tangled loyalties and choices she had made, I figured it would be weeks, maybe even months, before Lumen would show her face again. But as the late afternoon sun filtered through the trees, stretching golden fingers across my porch, she appeared at my door. I had just returned from running errands, the remnants of the dinner invitation still resting in a folder on the kitchen counter. I hadn't even taken off my shoes. When I opened the door, there she stood, Lumen, poised like she had rehearsed her visit 100 times, yet still unsure if she should be there. She wore a charcoal coat, buttoned up to her chin, her posture stiff with intention. In her hands was a thick envelope, the kind used for official documents. A deep crimson wax seal, marked with the family crest, gleamed faintly under the fading light. Hi, she said, her voice calm but carrying an unmistakable edge. I said nothing, too stunned to form a reply, as she held the envelope out to me. I came to give you this. Without waiting for a response, she stepped inside and sat down in the living room, like she'd done it 1,000 times, like we were still sisters without scars. I closed the door behind her. The soft click sounded like the closing of an old chapter. The envelope was heavier than it looked. I opened it with shaking hands, carefully peeling away the seal. Inside were notarized papers, legal disclaimers, statements, a typed and signed letter that carried far more weight than any apology ever could. It declared, in no uncertain terms, that Lumen was officially cutting all ties with the family trust. She was forfeiting any inheritance, any property, any legal or financial association with our parents' estate. I can't undo what they did, she said quietly, but I won't help them anymore. Something inside me cracked, not from anger, not even relief, grief. It poured out of me like water long held back behind a dam. I didn't sob, I wept. Years of hurt, betrayal, abandonment, washing over me in the silence of the room. She didn't move. She didn't try to hush me or offer useless words. She just sat beside me, present, and somehow, that presence made all the difference. I finally wiped my face and looked at her through swollen eyes. Thank you, I said hoarsely. I never thought you'd stand up. She looked down, ashamed. You deserved that long ago. The next day, I tried to breathe in a slice of normalcy. The park was alive with children's laughter, their joy rising into the clear sky like little kites. I walked slowly, letting my steps fall into the rhythm of late autumn. Near the sandbox, I spotted Mila. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, bouncing with every skip as she played with her friends. The sight warmed my chest. When she saw me, she lit up and ran toward me with open arms. Then, as she reached me, she tilted her head and asked with innocent clarity, Mom says you're a greedy witch. What's a witch, Aunt Avery? The words dropped like stones. My breath caught. Her voice was light, like she was asking about her favorite cartoon character, but beneath it, I felt the weight of poison pass down from adult mouths to small ears. I asked her what a witch was, Mila continued. She said, well, what she always says. I knelt down slowly, meeting her eyes. Mila, listen to me. You are not what people say about others, and I'm not what your mom says I am. Before I could continue, Vera appeared from behind, her expression a mask of faux surprise painted with sugar sweetness. Sweetheart, she cooed, don't say things you don't understand. I rose to my feet, meeting her gaze directly. I understand more than you realize. Walking Mila home, we didn't speak. The silence felt heavier than any argument. The sidewalk felt unfamiliar under my feet, like it had been shifted slightly since I last walked it. When we reached Vera's door, she was waiting, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. Did she say something rude again? Vera asked, already irritated. I gripped Mila's hand gently. She's repeating what she hears, Vera. Vera scoffed, brushing past it. Don't exaggerate, Avery. She said enough, I said quietly, locking eyes with her. She held my stare for a beat, then turned away with a sigh. I bent down to kiss Mila's forehead before turning and walking away. I didn't look back. That night, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Notifications popped one after another. The family group chat, once used to plan holidays and share old photos, had turned into a courtroom. Vera. Why are you upsetting the kids? You've always been too sensitive. Cressida. Now you're manipulating Lumen, just like Dad said you did. I read each message with a growing sense of detachment. I didn't argue. I didn't defend. I screenshot everything. Their words were no longer weapons. They were evidence. I felt strangely calm, as if I were watching a play where I already knew the ending. By morning, I was at Lumen's place. We spread the documents on her dining table. Financial statements, property transfers, hidden clauses in trust documents, shady requests disguised as family emergencies. Each paper told the same story. Every time I helped them, they took more. Each bailout cost me another piece of control. Lumen reached out and placed her hand over mine. If you go legal, she said, I'll testify. I'll back you. I met her gaze and gave a small nod. I'm not scared anymore, I said. And for the first time, I truly meant it. That evening, I sat in the quiet, sipping tea as I checked my emails. One notification stood out. A new document had been uploaded to the county records system. It was under my name. My heart stuttered. The file was marked with a recent date, just 2 days ago. Hands trembling, I clicked to open it, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The screen flickered once before the document loaded, casting a cold glow over my face. My breath caught as the PDF appeared, my name in bold at the top, a forged signature at the bottom. The date read, just 2 days ago. 2 days. They were still at it, still stealing from me, still rewriting my life in black ink and quiet deception, even after everything. I stared at it, my hands trembling with a familiar mixture of fury and disbelief. They didn't stop. They never intended to. A ping interrupted the spiral. My inbox lit up with a subject line that dripped with irony. Charity dinner Wednesday night, let's show unity. The sender, Vera. Always Vera. Always the diplomat. The family's polished mouthpiece. Unity. The word curdled in my stomach like spoiled milk. I nearly deleted it. But then something shifted inside me. Not curiosity, not hope. Something colder. I wanted to look them in the eye. I wanted them to see that I saw them. And more than that, I wanted witnesses. Public spaces meant optics. Optics meant leverage. So I ironed a simple, unassuming dress, tied my hair back like armor, and walked into the night not seeking peace, but preparing for a war cloaked in smiles and champagne. The community center smelled like over-sweetened coffee and manufactured civility. Laughter clinked off crystal glasses and floral tablecloths as a jazz band dripped notes in the corner. Guests flitted from table to table, playing pretend. I arrived late, intentionally. As I entered, a hush moved through the crowd like a gust of wind. Heads turned, whispers buzzed. I knew that look. The one they gave pariahs who didn't know they were unwelcome. I kept my gaze level. Polite nods, measured steps. My family, predictably, had taken their spot near the stage, front and center. Smiles plastered, backs straight. They were a portrait of familial perfection, posed and poisonous. Mom waved first, too eagerly. The kind of gesture meant more for the cameras than for me. Dad's expression soured instantly. He leaned in to whisper something to her before rising and cutting across the room. Each of his steps rang louder than the jazz. He stopped near the buffet, just close enough for his voice to carry, just loud enough to wound. "You're no daughter of mine." The music kept playing, but the atmosphere fractured. Conversations stuttered. Forks froze mid-air. Someone at the nearby table gasped. I didn't blink. I didn't give him the collapse he wanted. I placed the serving spoon back in the tray, turned to face him squarely, and said, "Then you have no claim on me either." It wasn't shouted, but it didn't have to be. It landed like thunder. A woman near the punch bowl whispered, "Good for her." Another gave a quiet nod. Dad's jaw tensed. Not with shame, he didn't have that in him, but with exposure. His carefully constructed world had cracked. He adjusted his tie with false calm, forced a smile, and walked away. I took my plate and made my way to the corner table, the one they hadn't assigned me but fit me best, out of reach, but never out of sight. And from that moment on, no one met my eyes for too long. But when they did, I saw it, something between sympathy and respect. Finally, I didn't rush home. Instead, I lingered, chatting with the event organizer about donation logistics. I asked mundane questions. I smiled for polite photos. I blended in, a ghost in plain sight. Outside, the parking lot was cooler, calmer. The sharp night air kissed my skin as I walked to my car. Then I saw her. Cressida. She stood by her vehicle, clutching a thick folder like a life vest. She startled when she saw me. "Avery," she said softly, I didn't agree with what Dad said. He was just honest," I said, brushing past her. She flinched. Then, as if summoned by fate, the folder slipped from her arms. Pages scattered across the pavement, legal documents, receipts, contracts. One sheet fluttered near my foot. I bent to retrieve it, more out of habit than interest, and froze. It bore my name, my signature. The title, Transfer of Ownership, Riverbend Property. The date, June 14th, 2020. I'd been in the hospital then, post-op, on painkillers, barely able to speak, let alone sign legal forms. "Cressida," I asked, voice low, dangerous. "Where did this come from?" Her eyes widened. I don't know. Mom gave me the folder. I didn't read everything, I swear." I studied her face. Fear, but not necessarily guilt. "You should start reading." She reached for the paper. I folded it calmly and slipped it into my bag. "I'll return this to the right hands." She stood there beneath the flickering streetlight, lips parted but speechless, as I turned and walked away. At home, I laid the paper on the counter and compared it to the others I'd saved, documents I knew were forged. It was meticulous, almost perfect, too perfect. The slope of the letters, the loops. It mimicked me, but it wasn't me. I saw it now, like a signature in reverse. Dad's precision, his neatness, his pride and control, all of it rewritten into this. A flashback hit. Him teaching me to sign my name. His hand wrapped around mine, pressing hard. "Never make your signature weak," he'd said. He had forged strength to erase mine. I took photos, uploaded everything to a secure cloud drive, and then I made the call. "This is Avery Cole," I told the lawyer. "I have evidence of property fraud. My name and signature were forged." Silence, then a steady reply. "Bring it in tomorrow. We'll begin." I worked through the night, methodical as a surgeon, pulled receipts, screenshotted texts, printed emails, the ones where they called me unstable, hysterical, ungrateful, each one a pixel in the bigger picture of gaslighting and theft. Lumen sent her notarized statement just before midnight. She included a voice memo. "I don't know what they're capable of anymore," she said, "but you're not crazy and you're not alone." That steadied me. I labeled every folder: financial, legal, mental harassment. Then I hit record on my phone. If anything happens to me, this is who did it. I listed their names, clearly, calmly, not out of vengeance, out of proof. Morning broke in thin stripes of light through my blinds. I drank my coffee, black, bitter, grounding. No calls, no texts, just silence. I handed everything to the lawyer. He listened, took notes. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "You've got a solid case. We'll begin proceedings." I thanked him, but dread had already curled at the edge of my spine. I knew them, knew what silence meant. That evening, I heard a thud against my apartment door. I opened it cautiously. A raw slab of meat lay on the welcome mat, blood streaked across the wood. A sticky note clung to it. "Family bleeds family." I took a photo. Not fear, not anymore. Just clarity. They wanted me silent. Instead, I sharpened my truth. Tomorrow, I would file the case. Let them come. The morning after I filed the case, I woke to silence, not the soft, comforting kind, but the sort that waits, thick and expectant, like the air before a storm. The coffee maker hummed in the background while my phone buzzed with messages I didn't want to read. Most were from blocked numbers, others unsigned. But one thing was clear: the family knew. Still, I didn't open any of them. I had learned that silence could be my sharpest weapon. The day crawled forward, steady and uneventful, until the knock came. Not the kind that made your stomach twist with fear. This one was gentle, almost uncertain. When I opened the door, no one was there. Only an envelope sat on the doormat, cream-colored and thick, sealed with a wax stamp. No return address, just my name written in looping cursive I hadn't seen in years. Elowen. Elowen was my mother's older sister, the quiet one. She'd never joined the shouting matches or the gossip, never taken sides. She'd simply disappeared into the background. At least that's what I thought. Inside the envelope was a folded letter, handwritten in blue ink. The first line read, "Avery, I've been waiting for this day for a very long time." I sat down on the couch, unfolding the paper carefully. Her handwriting was steady, but aged, with soft smudges along the edges. I've carried guilt heavier than I could bear. I watched them use you. I watched them rewrite your worth in ink that wasn't yours. And I said nothing. I was afraid of being cut out, just like you were. But I'm not afraid anymore. Tears blurred the words before I could finish. I blinked hard and kept reading. You were always the only one with a conscience, Avery. You saw through them even as a child. They called it rebellion. I called it truth. When your grandmother died, I witnessed what they did to her will. I couldn't stop it, but I kept a copy. The next line was underlined twice. It was never supposed to be theirs. My hands trembled as I reached for the second sheet tucked behind the letter. It was an old document, yellowing at the edges, but still crisp where it mattered. The signature at the bottom was familiar. My grandmother's, written with the same looping precision I remembered from her recipe cards. I scanned the text, my pulse pounding as the words sank in. I leave equal shares of the family home and assets to my granddaughters, Avery and Isolde. Avery will retain 60% of the trust in recognition of her continued care and contributions. 60%. Not zero. Not the loan forgiveness lie they'd spun for years. All this time, they hadn't just stolen from me. They'd stolen her intentions. A breath I didn't know I was holding escaped shakily. My hands covered my mouth as if to contain everything that wanted to break out. Anger, grief, disbelief. Lumen's voice from days ago echoed in my mind. They erase. But they hadn't erased everything. Not yet. I sat for hours just staring at that paper, running my fingers along the ink like it might disappear if I blinked. Then I picked up the phone. When Lumen arrived, she didn't speak. She just wrapped her arms around me, letting me press the letter to her shoulder. Then she whispered, "Let's take it to Sam." Sam, my attorney, was waiting in his downtown office, the blinds half drawn, his desk neat in a way that made me trust him more. I slid the document toward him without a word. He adjusted his glasses, scanning line after line. His brow furrowed, then lifted in something close to shock. "This is the original will," he said finally. "It's notarized and unaltered. Do you realize what this means?" I nodded slowly. "They used fake ones to cut me out." He exhaled, leaning back. "Avery, they didn't just manipulate you. They committed full-blown fraud. Every transfer based on the altered version is invalid." I felt something I hadn't in months. Vindication. Pure and steady. Lumen leaned forward, her voice shaking. "Can you make it official?" Sam smiled faintly. "Already on it." When we left his office, the air outside felt lighter, not because anything was fixed yet, but because the truth, finally, was no longer buried. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking of Grandma, of the summer she told me, "Kindness is not a weakness, but don't let them use it against you." I hadn't understood it then. Now it echoed in every breath I took. Memories drifted back like fragments of a movie reel. A Christmas dinner years ago, my father raising a glass and saying, "We all know Avery's generous. Too generous. Let's make sure she doesn't give it all away." Laughter followed, polite but hollow. It hadn't been a joke. It was foreshadowing. I saw it now. Every subtle move, every smile masking manipulation. How they'd used my trust as a weapon. How they'd made me doubt my own memory until I began to question my sanity. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the will open beside Elowen's letter, and whispered to the empty room, "You thought I'd never find this." And for the first time, I said it without shaking. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The city outside was still, gray light seeping between the blinds. I brewed coffee and began to work. Not out of spite, but precision. I scanned every page, attached them to an email, and titled it simply, "Legal Addendum, Truth of Record." Then I began recording. My voice was steady as I documented the entire timeline, the manipulation, the forged papers, the silence, and now, the proof. "This isn't revenge," I said aloud as I typed the lawsuit draft. "It's repair." By noon, everything was in place. The complaint, the supporting evidence, Elowen's letter, the will. Lumen watched as I hovered my cursor over the send button. "Once you do this," she said quietly, "there's no turning back." I met her eyes. "Good." Then I pressed send. It was almost anticlimactic, the soft whoosh of an email leaving my outbox. But the sound filled the apartment like the beginning of something irreversible. For years, I'd been the silent one, the helper, the scapegoat. Not anymore. I sat back, exhaling deeply, and felt the weight I'd carried for decades finally begin to shift. Not vanish, but transform. The sun had already set when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, I saw a man in a gray hoodie holding an envelope. He didn't say a word, just handed it over when I opened the door, then walked away down the dim hallway. Inside, there was no letter. Just a small black USB drive wrapped in a piece of notebook paper. On it, 3 words written in my father's familiar slant. "For your eyes." Beneath it, one more word, written smaller, almost shaky. "Confession." I stared at it, my pulse loud in my ears. For a long moment, I didn't move. Then, with steady hands, I set it beside my laptop. Whatever was on that drive, whatever truth it held, it would be the final piece. And when the time came, I would use it. The USB sat beside my laptop like an afterthought, small, almost forgettable, but I couldn't take my eyes off it. My fingers hovered above it, hesitant. Then, slowly, I plugged it in. The files popped up immediately. No password, no pretense, just a cascade of truths, finally given shape. Audio recordings, scanned copies of old property deeds, handwritten letters, even grainy videos, all time-stamped, all real. I felt my breath catch. I clicked the first video. My father's voice emerged, steady and disturbingly casual. "It just made sense to streamline the documents," he was saying. "No point in dragging Avery into things she can't manage." Then Vera's voice, clipped, calculated. "Better we consolidate. Protect what matters. We did what had to be done." They talked about me as though I were a variable, a line item, a nuisance, as if I hadn't existed as a daughter, a person, just someone to be worked around. I sat frozen, watching the layers peel back. The betrayals weren't emotional exaggerations. They were documented decisions, strategic, deliberate. Every pixel on the screen felt like a ghost rising. But then came clarity. I stood and crossed the room, pacing once, twice. Then I opened a closet and pulled out my camera. I cleared a corner of the living room. No distractions, just a tripod, soft diffused light, and a plain white wall. I positioned myself in the frame. My hands trembled as I clicked the record button. The lens stared back, my mirror and my megaphone. For anyone who's ever been told they were imagining it, this is for you, I began. My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear. I told the story, the BBQ invitation that turned into a public shaming, the corner table by the restroom, the empty seat where my name used to be. I laid it all bare. The property forged out of my name, the conversations recorded behind my back, the documents altered under legal pretense. I showed the original will. I zoomed in on the forged deed. I played my father's calm confession. I included Vera's rationalizations, no embellishments, no edits. I ended the video with one sentence. Silence doesn't keep a family whole. It just buries the rot deeper. The upload button stared back at me. I hit public on YouTube. Then I copied the link to Facebook, Medium, Reddit, and a handful of private messages to journalists. The timestamp showed 12:01 a.m. I sat on the couch, watching the progress bar climb toward 100%. Every time it ticked forward, I thought of another time I'd swallowed my truth to keep the peace. When the bar finally filled, I exhaled. This time, I wasn't asking for permission to exist. I woke to a phone vibrating off the nightstand. I blinked at the screen. Notifications in the hundreds. The video had taken off. Shares, comments, DMs. You're not alone. This is my story too. I can't stop crying. Thank you. By noon, a local news anchor ran a teaser. Inheritance heist. Woman alleges family conspiracy, posts video proof. Lumen texted me a screenshot of a tweet going viral. When your family betrays you and receipts are in high resolution. An email landed from a reporter at the Chronicle. Then another. People I hadn't heard from in years wrote, "I'm so sorry, I had no idea." But from Vera and Dad? Silence. No angry calls, no threats. Just a void, which, in some ways, said everything. The courtroom was colder than I remembered. Vera sat in a navy suit, her expression unreadable but tight. Valerian sat beside her, shoulders tense, fingers twitching on his lap. Sam, my attorney, whispered encouragement, but I barely heard her. My eyes scanned the gallery. I recognized neighbors, former teachers, even a few distant cousins, the family that once stood on a pedestal, now exposed, dissected. When I took the stand, I didn't falter. I told the court what I'd told the camera. Then Sam placed the forged deeds on the table and held up the original will. She walked the judge through each manipulated clause, each signature, each document scrubbed clean of my name. Then came the recordings. Vera's voice played, calm and transactional. Dad's followed, the admission that started it all. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Renner leaned forward. The evidence, he said, is both compelling and conclusive. Then, the court rules in favor of Avery Cole. The original will is valid. All fraudulent property transfers are nullified. Ownership and trust shares revert immediately. His gavel fell. The room didn't erupt. It shifted, as though the lie had been holding up the ceiling, and now we could finally breathe. I walked down the hallway toward the exit. Vera and Valerian stood frozen against the wall. Vera's eyes were glassy, her face pale. Valerian wouldn't look at me. As I passed, Vera muttered, "You've destroyed this family." I paused, turning just enough to be heard. "You destroyed it the moment you decided I was disposable. I just stopped covering for you." I didn't wait for her response. Back home, I moved through the apartment slowly, as if everything needed to be touched. I opened drawers, packed a small box, a framed photo of Mom and me, the letter from Elowen she wrote before she died, Grandma's watch still ticking. My phone buzzed, a voice message. I tapped play. It was Mila. "Aunt Avery, I miss you. I want to draw like you one day." That tiny voice broke me open like nothing else had. I sat down on the floor, clutching the phone to my chest. They had taken my name, my place, my history. But not her. Not the love that still managed to reach me. You are not their words, I whispered to myself. You are mine. Outside, the courthouse steps gleamed in the afternoon sun. Lumen stood waiting, car keys dangling from one hand, her other holding a small envelope, the deed to a lakeside cabin we'd bought together, quietly, weeks ago. Ready for a fresh start? She asked. I nodded slowly. Let's try. We walked toward the car, wind brushing against my face. It felt like shedding skin. But as we reached the door, I paused. My hand touched the inside of my coat, the USB still tucked in its inner pocket. I hadn't used everything. Not yet. Not the final files. The ones that named names beyond the family. The ones that implicated legal partners. The ones that could bring down more than just a household. They could fracture a legacy. Lumen saw the change in my eyes. What is it? I smiled faintly. Just not over yet. As we drove away, I looked back once. They thought the fire had burned out, but I had only just lit the match. Morning arrives softly, like a secret it doesn't want to startle. I wake to the sound of birdsong fluttering through the open cabin window, their chirps and trills wrapping around the wooden beams like a lullaby in reverse, waking me gently, reminding me that I'm not where I once was. I lie still for a moment, watching the filtered light dance across the walls. The wind carries the faint scent of pine and fresh earth, and something in me finally exhales. Lumen is already in the kitchen. The low clink of mugs and the soft gurgle of the coffee pot are comforting in their normalcy. I sit up, swinging my legs over the side of the bed, my eyes catching the easel by the window, and the painting in progress. It's still raw, unfinished, but the fact that it even exists feels like a quiet rebellion. 2 months ago, I hadn't touched a brush in years. My days had been filled with silence, but not the kind I could paint. It was the kind that pressed on my chest and settled in my bones. And silence as punishment, silence as denial, silence as survival. But now, color returns. The canvas before me holds shades of blue, white, and gold, deep, aching blue for the weight of silence, white for the truth I finally spoke, and gold for the dawn that followed. I didn't realize until now how much I missed creating. Not for anyone else, but for me. For my own voice. Lumen walks in, setting 2 steaming mugs on the table. She slides into the chair across from me, tablet in hand. Her eyes skim an article, and I already know what it's about before she speaks. Cole family assets frozen amid fraud ruling. Vera and Valerian's names are in bold, public disgrace, investigations, frozen accounts, their empire unraveling one headline at a time. She looks at me cautiously. You all right? I take the canvas and turn it toward her. She studies it for a moment, then looks up, eyebrows raised. It's beautiful, she says softly. I offer a small smile. I guess I finally had something to say. We sip our coffee in silence, but this silence is different. Not oppressive or broken, just still. Outside, the sun climbs higher, casting gold over the lake. I feel it warming my skin, and it feels like peace. The fallout was swift and wide. Forums, news sites, even niche blogs picked up the story. Screens everywhere lit up with my family's scandal. But more than just the fraud, it was the personal betrayal that struck a chord. People weren't just angry about money. They were angry about what had been done to me. She saved them, and they erased her. They wrote her out of her own name. Who does that? How do you recover from family treating you like a ghost? A few tried to defend Vera, blaming stress or calling it a misunderstanding, but my video, the forged papers, and the timeline told a different truth. A clearer one. Valerian vanished first, packed his bags and left town. Rumor said he was hiding out with distant cousins in Florida, trying to outrun shame. Vera, ever the image manager, stayed. She gave press statements, pointing to stress and miscommunication, but the damage was done. No one was buying the spin anymore. Once respected figures in their community, They were now just symbols of greed, betrayal, and decay. They weren't misunderstood. They weren't victims. They were architects of their own collapse. One dusk, the sky painted in soft orange and violet, I sat on the porch swing, cradling a blank sheet of stationery in my lap. I stared at it for a long time, pen in hand, unsure how to begin. Then I wrote, "Dear Mila, you are not your parents' mistakes. You are not the weight of their choices. You're so much more than the whispers that might surround you. One day, when you're older, you might ask why I left. I hope by then you understand that leaving didn't mean I loved you any less. It was the opposite. I left because I had to love myself too. You were never invisible to me. You were light, joy, the hope I held on to. Don't ever let anyone erase your voice. Speak boldly, love freely, choose your truth. With all my heart, Aunt Avery." I painted a simple tree on the corner of the envelope, roots wide and deep, branches stretching toward the sky. A quiet symbol of legacy. I mailed it the next morning, slipping it into the slot with trembling fingers. As the box closed, I felt something leave my body, like guilt or maybe the last trace of silence. That night, I pulled out the old photo albums. Pages turned slowly, dust motes catching in the lamp's glow. There I was, a child at birthday parties, piano recitals, school plays, always smiling, but always at the edge of the frame. The center never felt like mine. The photos didn't lie, even when we did. I saw the subtle clues. Vera's hands always resting on someone else's shoulder. Valerian looking over me instead of at me. I had been their afterthought, their contingency plan, their silence. I thought about all I'd lost: time, trust, belief in my own worth. But I also realized I'd gained something quieter, harder to name: resilience. I wasn't broken. I had been made strong in the fire of forgetting. I whispered into the stillness, "Some wounds don't close, but they can grow into something else." The days turned slow and golden. I painted with purpose, letting emotion lead the brush. The series I started became a collection. I named it Inheritance. Not the kind written in wills, but the kind carved in the heart. Each canvas told a chapter: silence, erasure, reckoning, light, rebirth. I painted through sunrises and into long, starlit nights. My hands ached with use, but my soul felt quiet, whole. I no longer looked at the forest and saw isolation. I saw possibility, a place where seeds could take root. This morning, the air is cool and clean. I walk barefoot to the edge of the lake, the cabin behind me. The water laps at my ankles. I stare out at the horizon, quiet and whole. I whisper to the dawn, "I'm not angry anymore." I pick up a smooth stone and toss it across the lake. It skips 3 times, then sinks. The ripples echo outward, soft, certain, steady. I turn and look at the cabin one last time. I know I won't return. But if Mila ever finds me, if she chooses truth over legacy, she'll know where to look. And I'll be here, not to fix, not to erase, always, but to welcome her. Sometimes the greatest act of love we can give ourselves is walking away, not in anger, but in clarity. This story isn't about revenge, it's about reclaiming truth, dignity, and peace after a lifetime of being silenced. Have you ever had to choose your sanity over staying connected to people who called themselves family? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more real-life family stories that hit home. There's more to come.